D&D is addressing the backlash against their new starter set, but is it enough to make this box worth a purchase?
This is getting really expensive.
Before we dive into the latest problems facing Dungeons & Dragons, why not take a second to hit those like and subscribe buttons to help us keep videos like this one coming? It really helps these videos and we really appreciate it. And then, let's talk some D&D. Dungeons & Dragons has spared no expense to try and push their new Heroes of the Borderlands starter set. From Critical Role collabs and having Tales from the Stinky Dragon run through the starter set as an actual play, to multiple videos promoting the launch of this new, far more expensive starter set to D&D players everywhere. But a few weeks after launch, and D&D is already having to address some major backlash with some new D&D Beyond content aimed at fixing some of the starter set's biggest issues. So just what are those issues? Well, two things have routinely been pointed out again and again by players and reviewers of the new starter set, only one of which D&D can really fix, so let's start with the one they can't do much about. Namely, that this starter set is more of a board game than an actual representation of D&D 2024, and it doesn't really teach or prepare you how to play the TTRPG. To justify raising the price of a starter set nearly 300% from the last go-round, D&D have filled Heroes of the Borderlands with tokens, cardboard class cutouts, tons of cards, and other physical visual aids, all aimed at making this game as accessible as possible to board gamers, and making them hopefully a little less salty about that big price hike. But the problem is, the product that delivers is not very reminiscent of an actual at-the-table D&D 2024 experience, and plays more like a highly tokenized board game than an actual TTRPG. It actually feels a lot closer to something like Dungeons & Dragons Onslaught board game than the experience most fans would recognize as D&D 2024, with its heavy reliance on tokens, cards, and physical props. And while that might make it very approachable for board gamers looking to make that jump over to D&D, it doesn't actually do a very good job in preparing them to play a game of D&D 2024. Basically, it only teaches you how to play the Heroes of the Borderlands and its streamlined, board game friendly mechanic version of the game instead of the actual D&D system, which kind of means you need a second starter to bridge the gap between Heroes of the Borderlands and an actual game of D&D 2024. Now, there is nothing D&D can really do about that. The starter set's already out and it kind of is what it is, and players may still find it enjoyable, but even if it will leave them floundering a bit and unprepared for an actual game of D&D afterwards. But the other big issue that D&D finally did address is the lack of resources to make these adventures actually feel connected and fully finished. Mainly because a lack of information and guidelines provided for the dungeon masters running the starter set. There are a lot of potential rabbit holes for players to fall down in this starter set that just flat out dead end because no guidelines or additional info is included to help DMs use them as a jumping off point for other encounters or weave the three different scenarios from the starter set together. You just kind of hit a lot of narrative dead ends, with the DM being forced to make up a lot of stuff on the fly and try and stitch it all together to prevent frustration, with no real help from the starter set itself, which will be especially tough if this is a brand new DM. But now D&D is admitting that yes, they made a bit of a mistake, and they have released a new wave of material aimed at those starter set DMs over on D&D Beyond to help them out. These include tips on how and where to use random encounters, advice on how to thread the three scenarios together in a much more cohesive way, and basically just a ton of new guidelines for DMs that should have clearly been included in the $50 starter set to begin with. On one hand, this is a glaring oversight for a company that is supposed to be moving to a franchise model where everything is done in-house, and doesn't inspire a ton of confidence as that will be a success going forward. But on the other hand, they are at least addressing some of the backlash in a timely manner, and putting forward a workable solution. Is it enough to make the new Heroes of the Borderlands starter set worth that $50 price tag? Honestly, it still probably should have been about $15 cheaper and just cut out some of the extraneous cardboard, but if you do decide to buy it, at least the DM in your group will finally have the tools needed to actually run the starter adventures in a cohesive manner. So what do you think? Are you shelling out $50 for the new starter set, or just jumping straight into a 2024 rules campaign without it? Let us know down in the comments, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons.